Hello again, everyone. John Ray here with North Fulton Business Radio, and boy, I'm excited about this one, folks. James Daniel is with us. He's with the advisory firm here in Alpharetta. He's going to talk to us about financial planning, and this is a good way to start the year here in 2026. Talk about investment strategies and tax strategies, and just getting your financial house in order. And I will turn to James here in just a second. But before we do that, I just want to remind you that, folks, we are broadcasting from inside Renaissance Bank in beautiful Alpharetta. And if you are tired of the big bank experience, that mega bank experience that gives you the AI flu, I call it, where they use all sorts of chatbots and AI computer-generated voices and whatnot to keep live people from talking to you. That seems like they're the business they're in. And that's not the way it works at Renaissance Bank. When I refer people to Renaissance, what they come back and tell me is that Renaissance is big enough to handle pretty much any need you can throw at them as a business, but they're small enough to deliver their services in a personal way. Now, here's how to check it out. Go to renaissancebank.com and find a local office at random. Give them a call. A live person answers the phone. Imagine that. That's just the first indication of what you'll get when you go to Renaissance Bank. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And now, again, I want to welcome James Daniel. James is the owner, founder of the advisory firm. James, welcome.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Delighted to have you here. Let's talk about you and your work. How are you serving folks out there?
You know, John, I'm a financial planner, and when folks ask what I do, that is what I do, and I enjoy it, and I think it stems from my engineering background and my natural inclination to not only just solve problems, but help people develop a strategy. And so when I meet with folks, it's really about finding out what they want in life. You know, what are they trying to accomplish? And then let's work backwards. Let's reverse engineer what you're trying to do and figure out how do we build a strategy so that you can accomplish your financial goals, your hopes, your dreams. And at the same time, let's find out what your concerns are. What keeps you awake at night, and what questions do you have?
I want to get more into that, but let's talk about your backstory and what I know this was a career change for you at a certain point, right, to get into this business?
It absolutely was.
Yeah, so talk about your backstory and why, where you started and why you got into this business.
So I came out of the gate as a electrical engineer and worked in the engineering field as a project engineer back in the 90s. And, you know, slowly with the Internet 1.0, started investing on my own. Back in those days, it was through an A.G. Edwards broker. And had actually never met the guy, just established an account and would call him and tell him to do some trades for me, and sort of learned the ropes a little bit. And you know, lo and behold, I got sort of a wild hair in the late 90s and told my wife, you know what, I'm done with engineering. I'm going to get into the investment world. And if you'll recall, back in the late 90s was sort of the advent of day trading. It wasn't where you sat at your home in your underwear and traded on your computer. This is where there were several offices down in Buckhead where you would go in, a big trading floor, banks of computers, you would establish your own account, and you would basically trade. And so it was a trial by fire. You know, it was a good way to learn the financial markets, learn how stocks act, and you know, get out there and get involved in it. And so that was sort of my segue. You know, quit your job and immediately go into that. And I won't say it didn't have some bumps and bruises, but I learned a lot. And I think, you know, that was my foray into this, but it was really at that same time period, at the height of the Internet 1.0 bubble, 99, 2000, my father retired. He was a lifelong Bell Souther. He was a technician for him, and he retired with what would be, you know, a modest retirement at this stage for most people's standards. He was fine, but, you know, back in those days, you know, I told him, I said, Dad, you know, I'm not licensed. I don't work with people. I just trade. So he went to work he went and found a traditional financial advisor and set up his rollover with them. And, you know, the strategy back in those days was, what are the 4 and 5 star Morningstar rated mutual funds? Let's throw you in a portfolio and call it a day and rebalance once a year and call you on your birthday. But the problem is Morningstar is backwards looking, right? And what were the 4 and 5 star funds back in those days? The technology funds. That was Internet 1.0 bubble. Everything was sky high, but they were rated the highest because they had outperformed. And Dad stepped off into retirement and promptly lost about 30% of his assets during the bear market from 2000 to 2002 on the drawdown, and ended up having to go back to work part-time. And so that sort of spurred me to go from trading to saying, all right, how can I start working with folks? I think I can do this a little bit differently. So I didn't really know about how the financial services side worked, so I hired on as a advisor at a large financial services firm, and you know, it was where you see sort of how the sausage was made, right? It was very salesy approach. So I tried to learn as much as I could, figure out what I was good at, what I liked doing, and you know, that sort of prompted me, that experience, to move on and found my own practice in 2006, so 20 years ago, really working with folks more in a planning capacity, because that's what I really wish someone would have done with my father, is set him down and said, hey, let's run some projections, let's stress test what you're trying to do, and let's make sure you have a strategy and a true game plan for how your retirement's going to look, rather than just guessing and hoping for the best.
Yeah, you know, the thing I find fascinating, and I remember that time well, so I'm dating myself as well. When you describe that, what comes to my mind, you describe learning the business of trading. That was back in the days. You remember the guy on the E-Trade commercial, you know, let's light this candle? Guy, you know, with the spiked red hair or whatever, whatever. Yep. I can't remember his name, right? But that was the mentality, and it was very, you know, the sky is always going to be blue kind of mentality, right?
And bubbles always are.
The bubbles always are. And so you've got experience in what all that felt like, right? And so you bring that forward into your practice today, and that's a little unusual.
Absolutely.
In a good way, I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I do have some gray hair. I've been doing this a long time.
Right.
And, you know, I was around during the first Internet 1.0 bubble in 2000. I was around in 2008 with the Great Recession. And, you know, if somebody came to me today, whether it's a prospect or friends or family or even somebody I strike up a conversation with over here at Taffer's Tavern, you know, if we're talking about, you know, where's the world going? What about investments? And, you know, they can argue with me till they're blue in the face, and I'll say this time's never different. You know, we've seen this before, and I just want you to be careful that you acknowledge what risk is out there. And while we want to think, I guess as human beings, we have a bias, right? We have a recency bias, we have an anchoring bias, we think the good times are going to roll. And I always tell folks, you know, look, whether you work with me or somebody else, really stress test what you're trying to do. If you're going to step off into retirement, just like my dad did, please, you know, at least stress test it and come up with different scenarios about what ifs. Because it's a sequence of returns risk. What if you step off into retirement the next couple of years and you do encounter a bear market that lasts more than 6 months? Maybe it lasts 2 years. How will that affect your longevity in retirement? How's that going to affect your finances and your ability to go enjoy your retirement? And so that's what I really sort of, I preach that gospel all the time, whether it's to my own clients or to just general folks I'm talking to out there in the community.
Yeah, and it strikes me that your engineering background, which I guess maybe the word is process. I mean, because engineering is strongly based in process, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and because if you don't have the right process, the electricals end up shorting out, or the building is leaning, or whatever, right? I mean, you've got to start with the basics and make sure you're building something that is structurally sound from the very beginning, and that background really lends itself well to of financial planning, thinking soberly about retirement, the assets you need for retirement. Having that background really helps you do that well, I would think.
I think it was a natural segue, and for me, it lets me use, that part of the brain where you really like to develop strategies. And so when someone comes and sits down with me, like I said before, it's, what do you want to accomplish in life? And then let's just lay it all out. Let's look at your complete financial picture, your balance sheet, your cash flow. Let's look at your insurance coverage. Let's look at your retirement goals, your investment strategy, your tax situation, and your estate plan. And let's build a strategy. Because if you don't know what the ultimate goal is or what you can accomplish, then you're just guessing. And so I really like to reverse engineer it and say, all right, what do we have to do to get from point A to point B? Give you benchmarks to follow so that you know, hey, this is what I got to do to get here, and this is how I know I'm progressing, that I can attain my goals.
Yeah, wow, great stuff. James Daniel is with us, folks. The Advisory Firm is the name of his practice. James, lots of financial planners around. I mean, we're in the North Fulton area where a lot of financial planners, investment advisors, wealth managers are based. What makes you different?
Wow. So I don't want to irritate all my friends that are in the industry, but what makes me different, aside from the fact that I approach it as a problem solver, not necessarily that you have to have a financial problem for us to work together, but I just like to build those strategies. But I think, even when I got back into the business, or when I got in the business 25 years ago, financial services sort of has that connotation of almost the whole car dealership thing. You walk in and you feel like you're going to be sold, right? I don't like being sold, and I don't like to sell. So when I set up this practice 20 years ago, I simply said, all right, I'm going to be fee-only fiduciary practice. I'm going to do financial planning. I'm going to do money management. And then I incorporated tax preparation along with that. Everything on a fee basis so that you take that whole fear of being sold right out of the equation. And I tell everyone, come sit down with me. Let's have a conversation. What are you looking for? Let me share with you what I do, and let's just see if it's a good fit. And there's not going to be any sales involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. Well, now I heard something there that sounds unusual. That's the tax prep.
Absolutely.
Right? So that certainly distinguishes you, right?
I think it does. And the funny thing is, I've been doing this so long now with incorporating tax preparation for my wealth management clients that I always scratch my head and wonder why more financial services firms aren't doing this. Because I established this business actually 20 years ago this week. And about 6 years into it, the number one reoccurring question I was getting from my clients was, James, do you know a good tax person? Or, James, I can't get a hold of my tax person, or I'm not happy with the way things are going. And then I finally just said, this is just sort of silly. I'm their financial planner. I know everything about their life. I manage their money. Why don't I just do their tax return for them? And so, I'd had tax training through the CFP program. I went ahead and went through the IRS Enrolled Agent Program, which is sort of a specialist in tax preparation, right? You learn the ins and outs of tax preparation. Got certified for that, and then just incorporated that in the practice. And so I think it's a great value add from what I'm being told for clients. As an example, they're busy with their lives, and they want one person they can call. And they're like, James, I just heard this. How does it impact my tax situation or my investment strategy or my overall retirement plan? And so by being a guy that can provide that holistic solution to these households, it lets them go live their lives and not have to worry. So I've done scenarios where after Trump's big beautiful bill this summer and the increased standard deduction for seniors, I went ahead and modeled out for a lot of my households, all right, look guys, this is the benefit for you based on last year's tax return. I just did a hypothetical, ran it out, and said, hey, look, based on the increased standard deduction, here's what we can do this year. Maybe we can convert some to a Roth, maybe we can take some capital gains at zero tax rate, but just to give them that ammunition and that knowledge, I think it's a huge value add for households, and it gives them a one-stop shop and one person that knows their complete financial picture.
Yeah, and it strikes me what they're getting from that is something that is not hypothetical, it's real life, because you know their financial picture, right? Otherwise, they're just getting whatever they read in the financial news, or if it's a financial advisor that doesn't do their taxes, everything they can give them is hypothetical, right?
Absolutely. And what's the one disclaimer you see on every financial recommendation is consult your tax advisor.
Right.
So I just approach it, well, I am your tax advisor, so when I give you a recommendation, it's because we've looked at the complete picture.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good. So I said tax prep, but I undersold it. I guess I I didn't emphasize the planning piece of that, because the prep is pretty transactional sometimes and easy to get. I mean, if you want to go down the street to H&R Block, they're happy to help you. And then I think you and I were talking before we came on the air. You pay your money, you get your tax return, you leave, and we'll see you next year, right? But having the planning is really the key, right?
I believe so, because just doing your taxes is cleaning up after the battle's been fought, right? So a lot of consumers, and that was one of the biggest thing I was hearing, over a decade ago was, hey, what strategy should I deploy this year before the December 31st so that I'm in a better tax situation come April 15th versus kicking myself going, there was no planning involved in the process. And so that's really what I try to bring to the table is, once again, if you understand somebody's full financial picture because you're their planner, you're managing their money, and you're doing their tax preparation for them, it just provides a much more beneficial, holistic relationship.
So here we are in early 2026. Congratulations on 20 years, by the way. There's
Thank you.
A whole lot of folks that don't get to something half that much, so congratulations on that. But early 2026, we're talking about markets at all-time highs. We've had significant returns over the last several years. What are you, knowing that you're not a market timer, you've already said that, you're a planner, what are you advising your clients these days?
Well, I mentioned the sequence of returns risk, and I mentioned my father's situation, and it's my true belief that markets run in cycles, and this time's never different. Ultimately, you got to look at valuations, and they will matter at some point. I'm not saying the market's going to crash next year or next week or 2 years from now, but I think we've had arguably the greatest bull market in history over the last 16 years, and the wind's been at everybody's back. And so for everyone that's had these really good gains and maybe gotten used to this 10% a year type average rate of return and wants to step off into retirement, I'm just telling them, be rational about your expectations. Let's really plan out what if scenarios and stress test your results. And if you are in a situation where you're moving towards retirement and you're thinking about making that step, run the numbers and what if scenarios. What if the returns aren't going to be this good going forward? Can you still have a comfortable retirement? So I'm just having people pay more attention to risk at this stage. I always think there's opportunity. There's always money moving in the markets, and there's always going to be potential out there, but you don't want to blindly take risk at this stage, any more risk than you absolutely need to for a comfortable retirement.
Yeah, let's talk about how you work with clients that are contemplating retirement and kind of how you walk through that decision-making process. That's a hard one, right? And you don't want to have a client that doesn't want to come back to work, have to come back to work, like you mentioned about your father.
Right.
At the same time, there are probably some clients that get out and they play golf for 6 months and decide, I never want to pick up a club again. I want to come back and work. So they're happy to do it. But how do you talk clients through that?
And that becomes where you straddle the fence a little bit, because I'm a financial guy and I can talk to clients about personal finance, and I can run those numbers and say, yes, you can do this, but there is a behavioral finance component to it. There's a mental component to stepping off into retirement and saying, I don't have to punch the alarm clock anymore. I'm done. James has set me up, and he's going to drop a certain amount of money in my checking account every month for my investments, and I'm good to go. But there's a big mental component to that. You've worked all your life, right? You've gone 100 miles an hour, and I always caution them. I'm like, look, I'll tell you on the financial side if we can do this, but you've got to have something you're looking forward to. What's the next stage in life look like to you? What are you excited about? What do you want to do with your time? Because if you tell me you have nothing to do and I find out you're going to sit in your recliner and watch TV all day, well, I'm probably going to push back against that, because I want you to enjoy life. I want you to take on this opportunity as sort of the next stage, the next challenge, and do whatever you've always wanted to do. And so I try to start working with folks in advance of that retirement goal, just so I can sort of tease them or challenge them to find, what it is. What's your calling? What do you want to do? And, I think mentally then they're prepared for it. Financially, we're prepared for it. So that gives them really something to look forward to.
So I'm sure there's some folks that have questions about, hey, James, I've got a great CPA. I'm happy with them. They do my tax work. Am I still able to work with you? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is the different ways you work with clients. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not here to step on toes, and I have great relationships with households where I've handled their retirement planning, their money management, and they've continued to work with their lifelong CPA. But I always tell them, hey, look, I'm a backup. If your guy wants to retire at some point and you don't know who to go to, I'll just step in and take over. But no one's obligated. So we've talked a lot about sort of what I call my personal CFO or platform, where I handle planning, investments, and tax for households. But I'm a financial planner. I will let folks come in and just say, hey, James, I need a financial planner. I want a game plan, a strategy. I'm at this point in my life, I just want to see what the future looks like and make sure I'm doing everything correct, so that when I wake up in X number of years, I feel like I've really made a lot of progress. And so I'll let people just hire me as a planner. You come in, you hire me, we'll get your plan developed, that's your deliverable. You've got me for a year for questions, and if that's all you needed, great. If you want to take another step and you want to delegate your investments, or you need help with your taxes, fine. We'll talk about ways we can work together, but no one's obligated. And in fact, if I have someone that comes in and say, hey, I just retired, or I've got this load of money I want you to manage, I'm like, hang on to it. We're going to develop a financial plan, because we need to both be on the same page as far as your outlook, your expectations. We need to see what we can accomplish working together and set those benchmarks. I just need to see if it's going to be a good fit. But again, I start everything off with that financial plan, and we go from there.
Yeah, that's really smart, I would think, because you've got a lot of clients that maybe have done their investments themselves, or maybe they haven't retired, but a lot of their net worth is in a home or two and their company stock or whatever, right? And there's really not necessarily a lot of investments to do in the short run, but there still needs to be a plan. So having that plan strikes me as a really good way to open up a relationship, and then you see how the relationship goes, both of you, and then as time goes on, maybe you go a little deeper.
Absolutely. And I don't want anybody to feel like they're ever pressured. And so I say right up front, I'm not selling you. I'm not going to try to upsell you. Here's what I do as a planner. And if I can add value to your life and help you plan now, and we just keep that planning relationship going off and on through the years, that's fine. If I can add additional value by helping you out with your money management or your tax situation, that's great as well. But I always want to give every household that option of how we work together, so that they feel like, I have their best interest at heart, and there's no fear that they're going to be sold some kind of financial product or upsold on some type of service that they don't really want.
Well, let's talk about the client out there or the individual out there that is thinking, what are the symptoms I'm having? that I need to watch for that makes me think I need to pick up the phone and call James? When do I need to bring James on the scene?
You know, I've had this a lot. And then as an example, you know, I'll have folks that they're inundated with social media right now, right? Whether it's Instagram, X, YouTube, Facebook, all these people are throwing financial information at them constantly, right?
That's where all the experts are, right?
Well, it's amazing how many financial gurus are on the internet right now. And you get pounded with this every day when you're scrolling your social media feeds, and they're telling you to do all this stuff, all this financial stuff. And I say, you know, wait, just, you know, take a step back. Don't take this as gospel. These folks are, you know, number one is they're not trained, they're not qualified, and they're not even regulated. So if you follow their advice and you end up losing a lot of money, it's on you. You have no repercussion with this. And so it's amazing. These folks are, you know, they're designed to get clicks and views. Mm-hmm. And so if you have financial questions, if there's something that's nagging you in the back of your head, or you've read stuff online about, you know, you need this product for a secure retirement, or you need to do this, or you need to trade these options, or anything like that, you know, that's what I do as a planner. I'm a sounding board for clients. And I'm like, let's you know, take a step back. There's a lot of financial tools out there. I'm not going to say any product is bad, but they're all tools, and do they fit your situation? So let's look at your life, your financial life. What are you trying to accomplish? And then let's really look at, all right, what are the best tools or best strategies for you to deploy to get there? And let's wade through a lot of this noise that is on social media.
You've mentioned a few, but I'd love it, James, if you, as we come down to a close, if you could share maybe another success story or two that help illustrate the great work that you do. I know you're in the confidentiality business, so I know we're not going to talk about names or anything, but situations and where you've helped clients and that helps illustrate your work. I think that'd be wonderful if you could share a few.
Absolutely. So, you know, my client base, as you can imagine, are folks that are probably my age and up, in their mid to late 50s and higher. As you know, they're wanting to make sure they're on track for retirement. And so I think being in the business, well, I've had this practice 20 years, and I was worked for the financial services company 4 years prior, but that 24-year span, I still have some clients that I worked with from the very beginning, and they came to me, you know, hey James, you know, I'm a teacher, and my husband does this, and we've saved, and we just want to know, you know, how do we have a comfortable retirement? And you know, really just putting it on paper, showing them how it's possible, and then watching their progression over the years. I mean, that's why I do this. You know, it's just, you know, knowing that, you know, it's when occasionally I'll get that call from somebody and they're like, you know what, I really appreciate you. You know, you've helped me through retirement. You're always there. You respond to me. You're a logical sounding board when I have my crazy questions. But I really love working with retirees and helping them through that progression and making sure that they're safe and sound and they feel like they have somebody that is watching their back, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, I got numerous stories like that, having done this for a while now. But that's one. And then, you know, there's the young professional couples that'll come in, and again, they're sort of grown up in that internet, social media age, and they come to me and they're like, James, you know, what do we do with this 401k, and what do we take advantage of with our corporate benefits, and do we do a Roth or do we do a brokerage account, or do I need to buy this life insurance policy this guy's trying to sell me, and what do we need to put in place, and just helping them simplify life and put it all together is a lot of fun, and just getting those folks on track so that you know that these young professionals are going to wake up 10 years, 15 years down the road and, you know, probably feel a little gratitude or thankfulness that, hey, we hired a planner early on and look at where we are now.
Yeah, wow. What great work. James Daniel with the advisory firm. James, this has been fantastic, and I can't imagine there aren't some folks that upon hearing you talk about what you do, wouldn't want to be in touch and talk about their own situation. So let's give them directions on how they can do that.
Absolutely, John. So I'm right here in Alpharetta, right off of Windward Parkway. You can find me on the web at theadvisoryfirm.net. You can find me on LinkedIn, through all the social media channels, and or you can give me a call, 678-566-3711.
James Daniel with the advisory firm. James, thanks for coming in and sharing your work.
Thank you, John.
Hey folks, a couple of quick things before we let you go for today. Now, if you are in the law practice, manufacturing, or some other business where client data is important, and folks, isn't that pretty much every business? Then here's a headline you do not want to be the subject of. Local business pays thousands in ransom after attack, cyber attack. And that's not, again, the headline you want to be a part of. And that's where Beyond Computer Solutions comes in. They handle all the security systems that you need in order to keep the bad guys out. And they're constantly circling your business. It's kind of like, folks, it's kind of like the reason you lock your car. You lock your car so that the bad guys will go to the next car that's unlocked. That's what it's all about with Chris Knowles and his team at Beyond Computer Solutions. They offer a complimentary security assessment. If you haven't had one of those in a while, or certainly if you don't know what one is, you need to be in touch. Beyond CS is the place to go to learn more. And by the way, they do all our work here at North Fulton Business Radio, and they do fantastic work. You'll be glad that you engage them. Also, I just want to let you know that if you are a professional services provider and you're having issues around your value, understanding your value, how clients perceive your value, your positioning, your business development, and your pricing, I've written a book for you. It's called The Generosity Mindset, A Journey to Business Success by Raising Your Confidence, Value, and Prices. It's basically where you can find the book where all books are sold, either online or in brick and mortar stores, but you can go to thegenerositymindset.com to find some of those places. And if you are in the North Fulton area, the book is over, signed copies of the book are on the shelf over at Barnes & Noble on North Point Parkway. So I encourage you to stop by and check out the book there, and check out Barnes & Noble there. They've got a fantastic store there. Also, I just want to thank you. If you're listening to the show, I want to thank you for supporting us, because as we come into 2026, we're going to be celebrating our 10th year of North Fulton Business Radio. This May, it'll be 10 years of North Fulton Business Radio, and we've only gotten this far because of you. You have supported us in so many ways, not just by listening to the show, but by sharing it, by giving us kudos on social media. You send me great guests, comments on the show. And by the way, if you want to do that, john@johnray.co is the email address. But you are the wind beneath our wings, and I'm grateful to you for supporting us in all the ways you do here at North Fulton Business Radio. Thank you. For my guest, James Daniel, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on North Fulton Business Radio.